So my parents totally disowned me and removed me from their will since I'm not their biological kid. But then I found out I was inheriting from a distant relative, and that flipped the script. Let's kick things off from the start. At 15, everything shifted for me in a big way. So my mom chose to chill out again, this time with a guy who had a kid from his last marriage. Justin was 19 and he was already 3 years older than me. Let's be real, we didn't hit it off from the start. Just as the ink on their marriage certificate was still fresh, the tension started to build. Initially, it was the small quirks that popped up when people found out they were unexpectedly connected and gathered together. Justin thought the dirty dishes would magically clean themselves if he just left them in the sink. Naturally, I ended up being the one who got a talk from my mom or my new stepdad about the chaos in the kitchen. On the flip side, I noticed my shampoo vanishing quicker than normal, only to find Justin sporting flawlessly styled hair that clearly came from my go-to product. It was odd, but I found myself feeling bothered by more than just Justin's behavior. Richard, my stepdad, dealt with stuff in a similar way. It felt like I was always the one at fault when things went sideways. He just assumed I was responsible without bothering to ask. And then there was my mom. She was so caught up in trying to make this new family situation work that she completely missed what was really going on. She'd just shrug it off, have Justin's back, and act like everything was cool. I could instantly sense the shift in what was expected. So Mom and Richard dropped the news that they were going to have a kid about a year into our tough living arrangement. That was the moment when everything shifted. Out of nowhere, it felt like the entire world was centered on the little one. The house needed some serious work, and can you believe which room they picked for the playroom? Totally, that's my take. I found myself crammed into a tiny, suffocating storage room that barely had space for my stuff. It really hit me like a demotion, a blatant indication of where I stand in this new family setup. A couple of months down the line, Oliver, my new half-brother, arrived and instantly became the star of the show. Justin sensed the change and became even more self-important. He left college and returned home, turning the place into a chaotic scene filled with late-night bashes and a revolving door of sketchy friends who popped in and out at all hours. Richard brushed off my complaints about the noise and trash while my mom just wore a sad expression, as if to say, "What can we do?" It was so frustrating. I began hanging out more at my friends' houses, looking for some kind of routine wherever I could find it. My getaway turned into school. I hung around for as long as possible, getting involved in every group and signing up for additional classes. It was beyond mere teenage rebellion. It was all about making it through. Home turned into this constant minefield where I was always on edge, just bracing for the next blow-up. It felt like being trapped in a tight space. One evening sticks out in my memory. I came back home later than normal and found the place completely quiet. A little note on the fridge said they went out to dinner. And guess what? I wasn't invited. I wasn't even on the guest list for this family dinner. That note hit way harder than I thought it would. I felt like a ghost, like I was just floating around without really fitting in anywhere. It really hurt. Right after I turned 19, it felt like everything was on the verge of falling apart. It seemed like Richard had a problem with me wanting to leave the house for any reason, even though I was only working part-time. He kept insisting that it would put my academic progress at risk. So one evening I got back home only to find my room completely wrecked. So Justin threw this party while my mom and Richard were out, and let me tell you, my room took a serious hit because of it. A shattered lamp and some unsightly alcohol stains on my project docs. That was a total violation of my personal space. The next morning I threw down the gauntlet at breakfast. Richard shot back with a frosty attitude, saying you really ought to have taken better care of your stuff. My mom just let out a sigh and murmured something about families uniting and moving on. I had wrapped up letting things slide. It felt like every move I made during those years was under a microscope, but not in a way that showed any real care for my well-being. It felt like they were just biding their time, hoping I'd slip up so they could point fingers at me. Justin, the ultimate couch potato, seemed to be living his best life without a care in the world. Oliver, my little half-brother, was just a kid, but the level of pampering he got made it pretty clear who the favorite in the family was. There was this one time I was deep into a massive science project that totally captivated me. Honestly, trying to get it done at home felt like an uphill battle. I craved some peace, so I created a little workspace in the corner of the dining area. It was like attempting to construct something fragile right in the middle of Times Square. I finally reached my limit. So Justin cranked up the music, Oliver was all over the place yelling, and Richard just couldn't stop whining about my project hogging space and creating chaos. Once I finished packing, I headed over to hang out with a friend. His parents were cool enough to let me work in their peaceful dining room. After what seemed like an eternity, I finally found my focus. That's when it hit me just how strange my home life had turned out to be. My buddy mentioned that I'm always welcome here. The invite was simple, but it really meant the world to me. Home was just a spot I was eager to escape from. Home is meant to be a safe haven, but honestly, every hour spent away from it made me feel a bit more at ease. I picked up some extra shifts at work. Naturally, Richard wasn't a fan of it. He often brought up my job as if it was just a distraction from school. But I understood the real reason behind his disapproval. I wasn't around as often for him to give his feedback. As I started to save up more cash, the idea of moving out began to creep into my mind, but I quickly understood that it wouldn't be a walk in the park. My mom and Richard just couldn't handle the situation. As I pondered it further, it became increasingly clear that this was the sole path to take back the reins of my life. I was a total bundle of nerves the day I made the call to tell them I was out of here. I found a simple but reasonably priced apartment close to my campus. I managed to stash away enough from my side gig to handle the rent for the first 3 months. It may not have been much, but it was definitely mine. The idea of carving out my own life and having my own space really kept me motivated. So one evening after dinner, I set Richard and my mom down at the kitchen table. My heart raced as I tried to maintain a steady voice. I locked eyes with them and declared, "I'm moving out." The atmosphere grew thick with silence, and I could sense the tension rising. It was so quiet you could literally hear a pin drop. Richard was the first one to chime in. He chuckled, shook his head, and replied, as if I had just shared the most ridiculous idea ever. "You really believe you are prepared to live independently just because you're older now?" His voice carried a mix of wonder and a hint of sarcasm. Initially, my mom kept quiet. She just sat there, eyes fixed on the table, her face giving nothing away. "I'm totally ready," I said, trying to sound way more confident than I actually felt. The whole thing kicked off when I mentioned that I wanted my own space and had the savings to make it happen. Richard totally lost it and started pointing fingers at me. I was self-centered, ungrateful, and made an effort to dodge my duties around the house. "Just so you know, he really admires you." He kept going, trying to make me feel bad about leaving Oliver behind, like that would actually be sufficient to keep me in a dangerous environment. My mom's reply was more composed, yet just as crushing. She didn't argue with me like Richard did, and she didn't try to hold me back either. She just kept going on about how families are supposed to stick together and that I'd regret it if I decided to leave. But I was aware of the truth. This wasn't about family at all. It was all about having the upper hand. I stayed put not just because I wanted my own space, but because I really needed it for my emotional and psychological well-being. I really felt like I didn't belong in what was supposed to be my home. I was fed up with being blamed for stuff I couldn't control and trying to fit into a family that clearly showed I didn't belong there. I dedicated the next few days to getting everything ready. Packing each item into a box was like a small victory on the road to independence, even if it came with its challenges. So my mom barged into my room on the morning I was set to head out. I geared up for yet another showdown, but it just didn't go down. Instead, she quietly assisted me with packing. We had a quick chat. She inquired if I required additional boxes or suggested donating some old utensils. It felt like we were both skirting around the real issues, engaging in casual chatter, to dodge the fact that this was the conclusion of something significant. Later that day, as I secured the door to my new flat, a whirlwind of emotions hit me. Relief, grief, excitement, and a touch of worry all rolled into one. I was totally on my own now. It was a mix of freedom and dread all at once. The initial nights were definitely the toughest. The apartment felt eerily vacant and silent. I realized I actually missed even the annoying noises of home, like Justin blasting his music, Oliver zooming around, and Richard's constant nagging. But as time went on, I started to really appreciate the quiet. After what feels like ages, I finally found the ability to breathe again. I could finally move around the house without the constant anxiety of Richard's unpredictable moods or the aftermath of another one of Justin's parties. I had the freedom to come and go as I pleased, grab a bite whenever I felt like it, and enjoy my sleep without any interruptions. I felt like I was finally uncovering my true self, separate from the chaos of my family. A fresh kind of liberation. Life quickly settled into a rhythm. I juggled my job, studies, and keeping my small place in order. It wasn't over the top, but it had my name on it. After moving out of their house, my relationship with my mom and Richard got a bit better. I maintained my space but caught glimpses of them now and then, which helped a lot. Out of the blue, my phone rang and it was my mom on the line. Her speech felt a bit subdued and lighter than usual. "Richard's been mulling over his will," she mentioned, as casually as if chatting about the forecast. "He's just trying to keep everything on track." I was a bit unsure, feeling like I was on the edge of something unpredictable. After a moment of silence, she finally said that he has chosen to include Justin and Oliver, but you are not on the list. Since they are his biological kids, he thinks it's a more logical stance. There it was, right in front of me. That really hurts. Honestly, I didn't think much of Richard, but reading it laid out so plainly hit me way harder than I thought it would. It wasn't just about the cash, it was all about the message behind it. It's a harsh realization that after all this time, I still don't feel like I truly belong to the family. I made an effort to respond without bias. "Got it." Mom, probably picking up on the pain, quickly tried to soften the blow. "Look, it's all just about the legal stuff, you know? It doesn't change how we feel about you, does it?" I might not have been convinced by her, but I let the chat shift to other topics. But the damage had already been inflicted. That night, I found myself lying in bed, fixated on the ceiling, feeling that all too familiar ache of not fitting in. I felt this urge to go up to Richard, to ask him why, or just to express how much it affected me. But honestly, I couldn't help but wonder what the point was. For ages, that family never really felt like they belonged to me. So what's the big deal now? I finally chose to step back. I cut back on my visits, focused on school and work, and dedicated more time to nurturing relationships with those who truly valued me. Friends, instructors, and coworkers who accepted me for who I am, rather than what I could offer or our past connections. These were the people who really counted. The pain from Richard's will and the long years of feeling like an outsider started to fade away. It wasn't a sudden change, but the anger faded over time, even if it sometimes flared up, particularly during family gatherings and when I caught Justin and Oliver basking in the attention. I started to understand that there are certain things I just can't influence. I began to create my own family and find my place in the world. A few months down the line, Richard bounced back from his health scare and everything went back to the usual routine. And then it was time for the real deal. I got an invite to a family dinner to celebrate Richard's recovery. Pretty cool, right? I stepped out because I had to, not because I wanted to. The evening turned out to be exactly as cringeworthy as I anticipated. Richard shared his journey of getting back on his feet. People were all over Oliver's latest academic wins, while Justin couldn't help but brag about his new job that he just scored out of nowhere. I just sat there not saying much, and it was super clear that I didn't quite fit in. But honestly, this time it hurt a bit less. I had accepted my role within the family dynamics. I felt like an outsider. But there were people in my life who genuinely cared for me for who I am, not due to family ties or genetic connections. I came up with a reason about needing to get up early and headed out after dinner. Driving home, I could feel a burden finally easing off my shoulders. "I'm doing just fine," I reassured myself. "Super awesome." I tackled the emotional roller coaster, confronted the reality of my circumstances, and came out on the other side stronger and more self-assured than I ever thought possible. After so long, I finally experienced a sense of peace. But life had a twist waiting around the corner. Just when I thought I had finally found my groove and settled into a nice routine, everything flipped on me once more. So there I was one afternoon, and out of the blue, I get a call from this lawyer I had never even heard of before. His tone was polite and formal, yet there was an almost regretful quality to his voice. "Is this Emily Carter I'm talking to?" he asked. "Yeah, that's totally me," I said, feeling a bit confused. "I'm reaching out regarding Catherine Brooks." Your great-aunt's estate, he said, his voice deliberate and steady. She recently passed away and designated you as the only beneficiary. There was a brief moment when I went quiet. I just can't seem to remember Catherine Brooks at all. She was one of those far-off relatives you'd hear stories about but never really met. She was childless, and I vaguely recalled my dad bringing her up a couple of times as someone who played a role in his upbringing. It's been ages since I last saw her, probably not since I was just a little kid. So it turns out she's decided to leave everything to me. The lawyer broke the silence, offering a simple, "I'm sorry for your loss." She was an extraordinary woman. Still processing what he said, I couldn't help but say thank you, so I was half expecting it to be something straightforward, like an old house or maybe a couple of family heirlooms, and I asked, what exactly did she leave behind? He mentioned that your great-aunt was doing pretty well for herself. Throughout the years, she has made some really smart investments. The estate includes multiple properties, a hefty stock portfolio, and a trust fund valued at around $2 million. My heart skipped a beat. I was just sitting there, clutching my phone, wondering, why is this happening to me? We didn't really have that strong of a connection. Back in the day, I took her on a few trips, but honestly, our relationship was never really that solid. I just couldn't wrap my head around it. The attorney mentioned that she left a letter for you. I'll send it along with the other documents. He pointed out that she elaborated more on her choice. Once we ended the call, I found myself just sitting there, fixated on my phone, attempting to wrap my head around it all. What made Catherine Brooks decide to leave everything to me? I barely know her at all. Did something go wrong here? The following days were filled with meetings with the lawyer, signing documents, and uncovering the details of my inheritance. There were properties, investments, and personal belongings along with the cash. Catherine Brooks' letter really hit me hard. She mentioned that she had always admired my independence and recognized in me a younger version of herself. She said I was determined, self-sufficient, and able to build a life for myself, traits she felt she didn't have when she was younger. She was looking to give me the chance to use her wealth for something that really mattered. It was totally intense. There was this relative I hardly knew who recognized something in me that my own family seemed to overlook. She valued me and made her choice clear. I decided to go for a studio apartment as my first step. It may not have been extravagant, but it was my own and marked the beginning of something new for me. I've been considering my financial future, so I went ahead and purchased a vacation home and put the extra cash into investments. I chatted with a financial expert to make sure I was making smart choices. It felt off. In just 1 week, everything in my life flipped upside down. I was finally free from the struggle of just getting by and worrying about making ends meet. For the first time, I felt genuinely safe and liberated. But with freedom came a whole new array of challenges. Initially, I kept the bequest to myself and didn't inform anyone, not even my family. Considering everything we've been through, I figured the news wouldn't go over too well. I don't owe them a thing. Secrets always find a way to slip through the cracks, and mine was no different. So it all started with this cousin I hadn't laid eyes on in ages, who somehow caught wind of the inheritance through some legal channels. My mom figured it out before I even had a clue, and then the whole family caught on right after. The phone calls began almost right away. Initially, my mother reached out with an unexpectedly upbeat and curious vibe. She gave me a compliment, then nonchalantly mentioned the tough financial situation she and Richard had been facing. I could feel the direction of the conversation shifting, and before I knew it, everything came pouring out. So Richard was the first to reach out, followed by Justin, and then a few distant cousins I hadn't heard from in ages. They all hinted in their own styles that they were after a slice of my inheritance. They'd say times are rough. My mom even said, "You know how rough Richard's health has been?" Like that somehow justified their sudden interest in me. It feels like I'm just a cash machine to them, completely overlooked otherwise. I was bombarded with a ton of asks for car loans and presents. It was like a pack of predators was hovering, just biding their time to strike. I was totally swamped. For a moment, I thought about giving up, wondering if keeping the inheritance was a selfish move. But then it hit me. All those years, I felt like the odd one out in my own family, constantly blamed, tossed aside, and overlooked. I put in a lot of effort to achieve what I had before this unexpected stroke of luck. I managed to get it all sorted out during college by myself, and now that I finally have some stability, they're trying to snatch it away from me. When I was going through a tough time, Not a single one of them stepped up to offer assistance. When my mom finally asked why I hadn't mentioned the inheritance earlier, I managed to push back against the guilt and manipulation. I gently yet assertively told her that our split was both emotional and physical. For years, I felt sidelined, overlooked, and disconnected, as if I had no place in the family. This inheritance gave me the freedom to live independently without depending on anyone else. This is my life, I told her, and I have to live it on my own terms. No offense intended, but I have to prioritize my own interests at this moment. That conversation went way worse than I ever imagined it could. My mom called me out for being arrogant and inconsiderate. Richard jumped in, giving me a lecture on how families ought to treat each other. Still, I held my position. Eventually, the calls dwindled, and the requests for cash stopped once they realized I wasn't going to cave in. It was tough, but totally essential. I came to a bittersweet understanding about family. It's wild how the ones you think have your back can end up being the ones who let you down the hardest. Realizing that I had taken steps to safeguard myself gave me a sense of peace. At last, I chose to take control and not let them run the show. This inheritance was all about seizing the reins of my own future, and even more crucially, having the freedom to live life exactly how I want. Things got a bit rocky in our chats, but honestly, I was used to it by then. I didn't need their approval anymore, and I wasn't obligated to give them anything. I had friends, mentors, and people who genuinely cared about me, not out of family duty, but because of my true self. The huge twist came from a totally surprising place. My little half-bro Oliver. I got this totally random, awkwardly scribbled note from him out of the blue. I apologize for reaching out for financial help. I miss you, he scrawled in his messy handwriting. Even though it was small, this step really meant a lot to me. Oliver, just 15, was trying to connect in his own unique manner. So we kicked things off with some texting, casual chats about his school and hobbies. Nothing heavy, but it was definitely something. It felt like the beginning of a small connection between us, even though I wasn't really holding out hope for mending things with the rest of the family. I was building a life for myself, independent and self-sufficient. After so long, I finally experienced a sense of total freedom. But that sense of calm didn't last long. Just when I thought everything was finally calm, my mom reached out to me again a few weeks after Oliver's letter. This time, she wanted to hash things out. I sensed right away that this wasn't going to be a conversation about mending fences or discovering shared interests. So I decided to meet her in a public place, hoping to keep the atmosphere pleasant. We met at a local coffee shop, and honestly, the vibe was off from the get-go. She hardly ever asked about my life or how things were going for me. Instead, she jumped straight into discussing the tough financial situation since Richard's health crisis and how Oliver's private school fees were piling up. I was just sitting there, tuning in, feeling like I didn't quite belong in her world of problems. It was clear right away why she wanted to meet up. She mentioned that they were considering upgrading the house and that she definitely needed a vacation to help with her stress. It was obvious she had no intention of mending our relationship. She showed up for one purpose only. At long last, I reached my breaking point. I sliced through the awkwardness of saying, "Mom, just spill it." She locked eyes with me and declared, without missing a beat, "I expect you to cut me a check for $500,000. I almost did a spit take with my coffee. Wait, what? I couldn't believe it when I asked. She stood her ground. That seems pretty reasonable. Well, technically speaking, since it originated from your dad's side of the family, that money should have been mine, right? I couldn't believe it. Her sense of entitlement and sheer audacity were truly mind-blowing. She lounged there, nonchalantly asking for $500,000 like it was just part of her entitlement. I stated flatly, making an effort to maintain my composure, "I'm not handing over $500,000. Her tone shifted from a sense of entitlement to outright anger, and her expression turned serious. She told us that we have always been unappreciative of everything done for us. Her comments made it seem like I was some kind of criminal for not giving her the money she insisted I owed her. I just paid up and walked out of the cafe without looking back. I'm honestly shocked that my own mother tried to manipulate me into giving her money that she didn't deserve. What came next was even more terrible. A couple of days later, my mom began spreading some gossip. She went around telling anyone who would pay attention that I had taken the inheritance, claiming it was hers by right and accusing me of hoarding it just because I was greedy. Out of nowhere, family members I hadn't spoken to in ages started reaching out, either to back her up or to push me into handing over the cash. The level of hypocrisy was off the charts, especially considering that Richard had left me out of his will just because I wasn't family. Even Richard chimed in, sending me a lengthy message filled with guilt about how I should think about the family and make more inclusive choices. I responded with just one sentence. Hey, just a reminder that I wasn't included in your will since I'm not considered family, right? That really put him in his place for a bit. But the saga didn't stop there. Things really escalated when I got this official-looking letter in the mail. To my shock, my mom was taking me to court. Absolutely, you got that right. She decided to take legal action against me there for a portion of the inheritance, arguing that as my father's widow, she had a right to a significant chunk of the funds. I was totally blown away. Did my own mother really take me to court? I seriously couldn't wrap my head around it. Initially, I was filled with dread, anticipating a long and expensive legal fight. I reached out to my lawyer and they chuckled after going through the letter. "This is a joke," he said, tossing the letter aside. "The will is solid as a rock." He then looked into the so-called lawyer who had mailed the letter. "The phone number is out of service, and the address on the letterhead points to a rundown building that's still being worked on." It was clear that my mom and Richard had hired a sketchy, definitely shady lawyer in a desperate move to scare me into handing over cash. Honestly, I was relieved that the lawsuit turned out to be baseless, but at the same time, I felt a wave of disappointment wash over me. I was honestly taken aback by how far they were willing to go for my inheritance. They attempted to guilt trip and manipulate me, and now they were throwing around direct legal threats. I was over trying to fix any kind of relationship with them. I realized I had to create a bit of space for myself. Once the legal stress faded, the emotional weight really took its toll on me. I was totally drained, running on empty, and all the ongoing chaos was really taking a toll on my mental well-being. That's when it hit me. I was in desperate need of a break from it all. After chatting with a few friends, we thought it would be a great idea to hit the road for a trip. Just a simple trip to a few places we had always wanted to check out, but never found the time for. Exactly what I was looking for. It's time to take a step back, find some peace amidst the noise, and really think about what I envision for my future. As we hit the road, I found myself thinking about all the changes that had taken place in such a short time. A year back, I was just scraping by in a place that never really felt like home. I finally achieved financial stability, secured my own place, and gained the independence to make my own choices without anyone else weighing in. It was a mix of freedom and nostalgia, a strange blend of emotions. As a kid, I really leaned on my mom and stepdad for support and advice. For me, family is all about having that unwavering support system, the kind of people who stand by you through thick and thin. Yet amidst everything, I came to realize a harsh truth. Being related by blood doesn't automatically mean they'll support you when it counts. During the journey, I spent a lot of time thinking and came to the conclusion that I didn't require their financial support, approval, or acknowledgement. I had all I could ask for, and the connections that truly mattered were with those who appreciated me for my true self, rather than what I could bring to the table. In small, meaningful ways, my friends, colleagues, and even Oliver showed me more genuine care than my mother or Richard ever did. After the trip, I thought it would be a good idea to send letters to every family member who tried to sway my decisions. I did it for myself, not for anyone else. I needed to find some closure, to say what I couldn't in the heat of the moment. I wrote in those letters about how their actions affected me, and how, even though I wanted to be part of the family, I always felt sidelined. I sent them my best wishes and hoped they could find their way forward, just like I did. The sole response I got was from Oliver. His letter was humble, yet heartfelt. "Thanks for getting the letter to me. I really miss you. We should totally hang out sometime. It may have been small, but it was a start. Oliver and I could potentially create something genuine without any strings attached or deceit involved." When it comes to the rest of the family, I've come to terms with the fact that keeping some space between us is for the best. The inheritance was a real eye-opener. It's not only a moneymaker, but also an eye-opener about my real family. It definitely wasn't the people who brought me up. It was the ones who had my back when I had nothing to give but my own presence. Honestly, when I reflect on things, I feel pretty content with my choices. I stood my ground, protected my future, and discovered tranquility by cutting ties with the toxic relationships that were dragging me down. Life has this weird way of showing us what really matters, and honestly, I'm thankful for it, even if the lessons were tough. Chilling at home, with folks who vibe more like family than my real relatives ever did, I totally feel like I'm exactly where I belong. Thanks for tuning in. If you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, go ahead and do it. And don't forget to ring the notification bell to keep up with more unbelievable real-life stories unfolding around you.